This is the Internet Court of Truth and Lies. Its purpose is if you see something on the internet that you think is true or you think that it's a lie, then you can bring it to up to 8 people who act as jurors to dissect the lie like you dissected the truth or lie with 8 verdict questions. And the verdict questions are always the same. They're generic for truths and lies. But their function is not to be exactly the right questions necessarily for the particular thing that you're looking at, but to structure the dialogue so that everybody answers some basic questions that are good for any truths or any lies. It's really to help keep the dialogue alive. The result of this is that people learn how other people are thinking. So the plaintiff finds out that something that they thought was the truth, somebody else may not think is the truth, or in a way that they didn't expect, or they thought was a lie, other people may not think it's a lie, the way that they expected. And everybody something about how other people are thinking. That's really the value of the thing. Today, we're going to do a trial where I'm the plaintiff. It's on a theory of brain computation that I and some number of other people have bought into. And I bought into this back in the early 80s. This trial is about what's called the perceptron, which is the unit of processing that we believe is the correct scientific way to describe the unit of processing in any neural system. That includes any animal and humans. It's called a perceptron. There's a history behind this idea that goes back to the 1940s. I bought into it back in the late 70s and early 80s. I was modeling in it. The problem I had was we didn't have the computational power to properly model how we thought the brain computed. We could generate a few thousand of these perceptrons working together. That was pretty much all we could do, when in fact we knew we needed billions, hundreds of billions of them before the system would really start behaving like a human being. And what we've seen is that, as we predicted back in the early 80s, once you had enough hardware and you had enough of these things computing, the thing would start becoming very human-like. This particular paper is on perceptrons. Part of its purpose is to let people know how the theorists like myself think about perceptrons, because there are some things that we believe are true about these models that are very counterintuitive. We'll describe a perceptron, but we really don't exactly mean a perceptron in the way that it was originally conceived. This whole article is about properly defining a perceptron and properly defining what we've been doing from a theoretical perspective. It's a fraction of what this paper could easily be a couple of books from the point of view of the detail we can supply. There's a community of us out there. I honestly don't know the number in the community. If you told me it was 1,000, I would be surprised. If you told me it was 100, I wouldn't be surprised. But we're out there, and we tend to agree with this same model. There are some areas where I'm unique in this. Some of this is brought up in this paper. I'm going to go over this theory. The title of the paper is Why the Theory of Brain Computation is Called Perceptron Theory. It's not exactly what we think about your learning, thinking, memory, and behavior. Perceptrons are a kind of a simplification, but it's a simple, highly predictive model of that. In other words, when we get into how the brain compute, we may have a variant on the Perceptron model, but it'll still be in terms of these units of processing where you have very large numbers of them that are organized in very complicated ways. The reason they're very complicated organizations is we've got something like 500 million years worth of evolution, where the human brain actually is a collection of brains that were evolved over time. There's some early parts of our brains that are very reptilian in nature, how they operate, and there are other parts that are uniquely human. So for example, the left up right around here and probably around here, there are uniquely human parts of the brain. But they all compute fundamentally in the same way. We can handle it all with these perceptron models, and we've been able to demonstrate that we can. That's what this paper is about. It's trying to communicate that there is this sort of abstract notion of a model that we can implement, that we can write the code for, we can train it up, and it will behave like humans. From there, we know what these models could be in the next few years as the engineers improve their use of hardware and so forth and so on. We know where this is headed, which is basically creating human-like things. I want to go over the structure of the paper. This paper is really not intended for this audience. This paper I wrote for my peers in AI, my peers in computational cognitive neuroscience. So they have a better understanding of these perceptron models, how people like me think about them. That's what this paper is about, technical, but not technical. I want to give y'all an example before I go over this. There's a scientist named Albert Einstein, which everybody knows. And most people don't realize that physicists work out math, but then they cherry pick the math. They don't really mean exactly the math that they derive. They cherry pick it to say this part is valid explanation or valid analog to what we think goes on in reality. This other part, even though it's there, just ignore it. Don't think about it because we don't think that's real. What physicists can do is they can model reality very accurately, but it is by cherry picking. Most people don't realize that Einstein, in a very short paper where he derives E equal mc squared, he derives it from Maxwell's equations and a guy named Lorentz's equations and his special relativity equations. It just derives E equal mc squared, but it's not actually E equal mc squared. Most people don't realize that. But if you read the paper, you watch him do it. In deriving it, he gets some higher order terms in the equations, like something to the fourth order with an exponent of fourth power, fifth power. And he actually gets to something where he's got an infinite series. So the equation turns into an infinite series of values that have to be added together to get an answer. And it's truly infinite. And so what he does is he just waves his hand and he says, okay, I'm going to ignore all the higher orders above, like the third order or something like that. Throw it out, even though it's needed. Now it gets an equation which is actually not E equal mc squared. The equation he actually gets is E equals to E equal mc squared plus a momentum term. So light can push mass. It's E equal to mc squared plus some momentum. The momentum can go to zero under certain relative motion situations. But that's where E equals mc squared. Ultimately, it does boil down to predicting E equal to mc squared under certain circumstances. He's doing the same thing that we're doing with this theory. It's just we're throwing out things that we think don't matter. And now what this paper is about is throwing out things that don't matter and keeping the things that we think should matter. That's what makes it a theory. We believe it's a theory that accurately predicts whole bunches of things that we were completely unable to predict before these perceptron theories. Perceptron is the stupid little simple thing that I've talked about before, where you've got these inputs, which I use the fingers to talk about, and each input takes some input from somewhere, then multiplies it by each finger has its own little weight, which is its memory. And the weight gets multiplied by the input. All the weighted inputs are summed, and it yields an output, which I call the thumb output, and that is a perceptron. I can show you that even Wikipedia recognizes what a perceptron is. It's fundamentally a type of correlation function, probably the most primitive type of correlation function. We think that when you try to count the number of perceptrons, number of units of computation in a human brain, you'll get quadrillions of them that are in any brain. And we can count a lot of them. We can get to the quadrillions by showing you these numbers. I gave you a couple of ways to do it here, but there are a lot of ways to do it. And they all come out roughly in the quadrillions. We don't really know how many there really are, but it's a huge number. And a lot of that huge number comes from the fact that there are many brains inside between your ears. There are some old brains and some newer brains. There's some specialized brains for certain things and so forth and so on. But they're all neural systems and they're all computing, we believe, the same, fundamentally in the same way. But what they're computing on is different for these different brains. But that's where we can get these counts. Another place that we can get these counts is we have these things called fMRI or EEG records that can record the activity of the neurons in the brains. And we get these counts that way too. So we get these very large counts. So part of this is to say that perceptrons are in very large numbers. You can get human-like behavior if you just understand what these perceptrons are. They most fundamentally are correlators that they're basically little memory units. They just see something that they recognize and they're intuiting that they recognize it. They're not doing a proof that thing is there. Part of the reason for that is reality in its evolution. The animals would never have survived if they required proof of everything that they could react against. So if they required that they could prove that the snake was going to eat them, then it would be too late. They had to intuit that the snake was going to eat them and have a mechanism to say, I recognize this is a danger to me, and so forth and so on, even though they can't prove it. And so what these correlations do is they can't prove things themselves. They can intuit things themselves. What we realized in working with these perceptron systems back in the 80s was we realized they could do proofs. They could actually do logical proofs. So when you had all the evidence, all the empirical evidence that something was absolutely true, they could intuit that's true too. And they could require that the logical truth be provable. You could have them computing math. You could have them programming computers. Everything that a human can do, you could have these things do. We were working that out in the 80s and early 90s when we could find that we could do these things and we could show that you could do it. In the later 90s, we first got hardware. It was a chess program that used this perceptron theory, neural nets, and we beat all the chess masters. Chess had the databases that we needed to train off of so we could run the neural nets on very large numbers of chess games. The rules of chess all by itself they could play chess. That was the first time that we demonstrated that in the late 90s. And then recently, in the last 6 or 10 years, we've been able to demonstrate that we can create things like ChatGPT and Claude and Gemini and so forth that really do behave like humans, both for good and bad. That's what we expected. We believe in the Turing test. The Turing test is very old. It's Alan Turing. It was from I don't remember the date that he suggested it. He suggested it in passing. Some of his great work was done in the 30s. He was a guy that was modeling how the brain operated. And the Turing machine, which is the basis for most modern computers, was his model for how the brain computes, which was the wrong model, but the right model for how another type of computer could compute, but not the human brain. It became the computer that we see today, that everybody thinks is what the brain does, but it doesn't. The Turing test says that if you think it's human or human-like, it passes the Turing test. So when you interact with it, if, boy, this thing's speaking regular English to me and he's answering my questions and he's making sense, you're passing the Turing test. That's the test that we put these models to. So people like me, we believe in the Turing test. We don't necessarily believe in Joe Blow's version of the Turing test. We believe in what we see, and we think that everybody can see, which is, oh my God, ChatGPT acts like a human. People get upset that it acts like a human because it can get fooled. It can learn things that are not true. Humans do that too. That's totally expected behavior. And you can get it to learn things well enough in certain areas where it becomes very logical. You can never have a version of these models where you can't construct situations where you can fool them. They can give the wrong answers to things. But we expect over the years that as we improve these data centers and so forth and so on, they will get closer and closer to being extremely expert superhumans, brains. And we expect that to happen. Where we get the most traction for these perceptrons is in the analysis of natural language. And that comes from a hypothesis that we have, which says that human natural language was to be the most direct way in which one brain can communicate with another because it speaks in the language of the brain. So natural language is a brain-to-brain direct connection mechanism that evolved uniquely for humans. It's the reason we conquered the world, basically, because we're able to achieve communication between members of our own species that no other animal can come close to. We win all the wars, all the survival wars. And I give a little breakdown of how that works in this paper in terms of how we justify what we think works. I'll give you all a little insight, not in this paper directly. So this is a neural network, and these little, what's called the hidden units here, are all explicit perceptrons. So you have a hidden unit that has multiple inputs and 2 outputs. These 2 outputs are essentially the same. They're just going to 2 different perceptrons and they're output perceptrons. And there's no output to the output, but you could have it. So this is just an illustration of how neural networks work. And this is called fully connected networks. Most of the systems today are all fully connected networks where all of the perceptrons on one layer, like the hidden layer here, are fully connected with the perceptrons on output input layer. And the direction of the perceptron computation is from left to right. It turns out that a system like that can't learn. And you actually see that when you're using ChatGPT and all these other things. You notice that they can get ChatGPT and stuff to run on lesser machines, because just going in one direction and using the memory you already have, they are very fast, they're very efficient, and they can be put on smaller machines. Learn new information. For the memories to be adjusted, you have to have something called backprop, which is a different operation. It's the operation where the perceptrons act in reverse, and they train up those weights that are in the fingers that are used in this direction. What we believe is that most of the time when you're understanding the world and talking, all these other things, the perceptrons are acting in one direction, and you're really not learning new things. But you can desire to learn something new. When you're not learning new things, you've got short-term memory for sentences you heard. You'll remember for a few minutes a few things, but you won't have any long-term memory. Until you start learning stuff, you'll get the long-term memories will change. These weights will change, and that's backprop happening. Part of this model is an explanation for short-term and long-term memory in any neural system. So there are ephemeral understandings that happen, and you'll see that in this grammar. You see this in parse English sentence. My brain can understand my brain. There are memories that are involved here that allow you to get these understandings, like my brain means the brain is mine. This becomes a subject for a predicate that says a phrase, can't understand, means understanding is possible. These come together as a subject and predicate that says my brain can be understood. And then by what? The answer is my brain. So my brain can understand my brain. Now, whether that's true or not is anybody's guess, but we think it's true. We think this is the way you can understand your brain. So what we show, understanding the relationship between mind, brain. There's ephemeral memory here, which is when these things get brought together. There's not a lot of memory for these things. The subjects and predicates are being brought together, but they can be forgotten. The knowledge can't be forgotten that allowed them to be brought together. That's long-term memory. You'll lose what that sentence was that he said at 3:30 p.m. yesterday afternoon. But that'll get lost, mainly because you don't have learning being forced. The backprop is not happening to change the weights. Now, events can happen where you decide to remember something. And when you decide to remember something, you are causing the backprop to happen. That's the theory. That's something I didn't say here, but that's part of how this natural language stuff works. And why we're not surprised when somebody says that they can remember something if they try to remember it. Or not. Yeah. Or have errors. Yeah, this system is an intuition engine. These are perceptrons. They really do operate like that. And you can get overtraining, undertraining. You can get noise building up, which we believe that sleep is all about. The brain, it's just getting too noisy in the brain. These perceptrons are just getting too noisy, and they're not arriving at the correct conclusions. And you need sleep. All animals need sleep in order for the system to settle down to a place where the recognitions that are having to happen are working again. But it's this dehierarchalization or hierarchalization of information that breaks down. And that precise hierarchalization is also consciousness. So consciousness breaks down with lack of sleep until you die. So for 11 days, your brain just stops controlling things correctly and you die. It's reported people go into delirium, or they're really not conscious after with enough lack of sleep. They forget what's going on around them. They don't know what's going on around them. So that's how that stuff is said to work. We believe that this is a real theory. Fundamentally, we believe that we've been vindicated now with the modern AI that uses the computation the way we think it actually operates in the brain. And we've thought this way for many years. We finally have gotten enough money to build the systems that demonstrate that it does that. And so we can project what the future will look like and so forth and so on. That's my argument. I realize this is what it is. I'm arguing that this is a good model of units of computation in living neural systems. There's some claims that are made in the paper that are testable claims. We know of no tests that the system do not pass in terms of the claims that we've made. They're modeling systems, so they will never be perfect. And there'll be places that you can look at and to say, this is important to these neurons that's not covered by this system. And we'll go, yeah. There is an activity going on in Europe that's a heavily funded activity. It's called the Connectome Project, where they're trying to model the actual functioning of the neurons in all their detail. It's a huge project. It has made very little progress in actually creating a machine that can talk. It definitely can't talk, but they're getting all the details of all the chemistry in these complicated assemblies, and they are doing it, but it's not going to perform in terms of passing Turing tests like this model performs. Is it the truth? This is the best model we got, and we've had it for a long time, and we're now reaping the benefits of the predictions that we made now that we have the hardware that's able to compute the way we thought. Is it the whole truth? I tried to, again, you could write books on the knowledge we have on these things that lead us to believe this, but it's a complete explanation. What I tried to do was in a few pages give you a complete view of what this explanation looks like and why we believe it's true. Is it nothing but the truth? My argument is I tried not to include any lies in making my case, speaking English, so I probably lied a few times, but I didn't know it. And certainly to somebody I lied. What's the deceit? This is a scientific hypothesis, a theory, scientific theory, but it is science. And we believe that there is no deceit here, but something's going to change in the future. We just don't know how it's going to change. Is the deceit of truth intended? The truth is intended here. Since I'm the guy who wrote it, I'm 100% sure that I intended what I wrote. What's the motivation behind the truth or lie? It's just to be informative. We've been trying to figure out a way that a brain can understand a brain for many years. We believe we've got a good model. It's a good model that allows us to see most everything that we know about how humans behave, think, perceive, do things, how they control their muscles, all this other stuff. What's the social acceptability of the truth or lie? I think acceptable as long as I'm science. Now I tried to bring the Einstein thing in to show you what good science is. It's not necessarily what you think it is. So equal MC square threw out a whole bunch of formulas and numbers. Just threw it out the door and said, I don't want to deal with those. I'm just going to deal with these. I know those could be making a difference, but I don't care because it makes my life too hard. That's science. That's okay science.
What I think label? Bit hard on you're being a bit hard on Einstein there.
He really, I'll show it to you.
But that's the rest mass of the particle, and he acknowledged perfectly well that there was all the momentum and stuff was other part of it, but he's just talking about the rest mass. He wasn't scared off presenting the other stuff.
Yeah, this is just a Taylor expansion. You could just say, you knew that those other terms were going to contribute too small.
Yeah.
So who cares? But he did that. Right?
Yeah, okay.
He did it. The label would improve the social acceptability. I just said no label needed because, I wouldn't know what to say other than what I've already said. We'll go over the jurors, give a 20 or 30 second on the summary. I fully understand that this is not a normal trial. Next week, I'm going to do a more normal trial and do something that I think is a big lie out there. But this one is different. I just felt the need to do it because I need to get a few of my peers to know what I'm talking about, who will understand this.
Oh, we're just the right people to put you straight then.
Yeah, you're just the right people to put me straight. Absolutely better than you can possibly imagine.
So that, unfortunately, is me to start this thing off with the jurors. Okay, I wanted to know how to explain this perceptron stuff to a 5-year-old because my brain just don't brain. And here's what it says. A long time ago, a scientist wanted to build a tiny robot brain that could see and learn things just like you do. He named it Perceptron. Percept means noticing things like when you see a toy or hear a song. Tron just means it is a cool electronic machine. So a perceptron is basically a tiny robot switch that tries to copy how the little pieces inside your head work to help you think. And then that led me to thinking, can humans be paid to be a humanoid? And they can. So, yeah, that's where I stand.
It's fine. The way I explain it I can't explain it to a 3-year-old, okay? Just to be clear, okay? But to a 6-year-old, I do explain it. And I said, you've got 100 billion, because some of them know that billion is a big number. You've got 100 little brains inside your head, and they're all talking, they're all participating. But what they do is each one of them knows a little bit about the world.
I think my brain is down to -1.
And what your brain does all the time is it's putting these little pieces together, and it's understanding where it is and what it's doing. When you're hungry, it understands you're hungry, and you go get some food.
Yeah.
And if you like a toy or flying a plane around with your hands, it knows that you're playing with a toy plane.
I'm scared to know what my brain thinks about me sometimes.
But anyway, it's just all these little pieces are coming together from these little compute engines that are in the 100 billion of them. It's some very large number. And that's the way your brain works. That tends to work. At least I think it tends to work at the 7 or 8-year-old level because they can see it. But anyway.
Yeah, the 5-year-old summary, it did seem to help me understand a little bit better than the whole article and stuff itself. So then my brain just don't brain.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay. So I like the concept of perceptrons as a unit of measurement and a unit of comparison. I don't know much. I know a tiny little bit about them, the inputs, the weights, what leads to fire angle 1 or a 0. But I like the concept of perceptrons for like tokenization of computational thought. Do you think that the perceptron is a unit like a Pascal or something else or a joule that can be used to compare two separate systems like an AI as compared to a...
No, a perceptron is a modeling tool. It's a modeling tool. That's all it is.
Okay, so using it as a unit of measurement would be inappropriate.
It's a unit of computation. It is a basic unit of computation, and under the modeling system, it is the only unit of computation you need. If you put enough of them together the right way, you will get human brains.
And so that's my question is, does perceptron, could we say, and just hypothetically, 2 billion perceptrons in a human brain equal 4 billion perceptrons in a LLM?
So we don't actually, that question is a really good question. And the right answer is we don't know. In one of the paragraphs, I said we can count synapses and say every synapse is a perceptron. And we don't actually know. We know that if you look at the neurophysiology, the real neuroscience associated with neuron, that ion channels, a synapse is a type of ion channel. And we know in the brain, there are, for example, glial cells, which are not neurons, but we know that they participate in the computation. We can see it. And so but we don't know exactly how. And going inside the brain and trying to probe for one perceptron, we don't know how to do that.
Yeah.
We
So
just
it's
don't know. Yeah.
Although it can be used as a unit of measurement, using it for an organic system is inappropriate at this time.
It's a great modeling tool. It tells you how to predict how you can create artificial humans, which is what it was supposed to do. It was supposed to pass the Turing test. And it seems to be able to do anything that a human can do. We can't find anything that a human can do that it cannot do.
Understood.
Crazy. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. 04?
Yes, that's me. I'm sorry. I had a little help summarizing. I took notes and then I got a 30-second summary. Imagine your brain's made of a billion tiny light bulbs. Okay, when you see a dog, a certain light bulb click on and tell you, hey, that's a dog. The Perceptron was the very first robot light bulb. It works in 3 steps. Listens to different inputs, judges which ones are the most important, like you said, then it makes the choice. Yeah. If the important points are high enough, the bulb clicks on. If not, it stays off. That's exactly how machines started learning to perceive the world, which is where the name Perceptron came from.
I think that analogy is a great analogy. I have no problems with that at all.
Okay.
That's a wonderful thing.
It's a math-based brain cell, and it was the first giant leap in teaching robots how to...
When you say math-based, this is not math.
Oh, it isn't?
So it's a correlator, but I think I point out there's a million ways to do correlations. People don't understand that. So it is a very primitive correlator that we can build electronics for. But there's basically an infinite number of possible correlators that we could have used. And they will all do the same thing. They will all fundamentally be little correlators, but they will all have memory, the way that we just define the memory.
Yes.
But of course they're correlating to something. But the reason that we do perceptrons per se, the formal math description of a perceptron, is that it's the simplest way to implement the hardware.
Okay.
But it's not because we believe that's the only way to do it. We think that you could pick any one of these million or so types of correlators, and they will all yield exactly the same thing, human behavior. If you use them instead of the weighted sums, you need a notion of these weighted sums. It's a long story, but they don't even have to be a multiplication. There are a lot of correlators out there. I've argued for many years. I used the perceptron correlator because it's convenient. I could use a Pearson product moment correlation just as well. Then there's 1,000 others I can mention that would also work. And maybe the brain does combinations of these. I have no idea. And we don't really know. But it doesn't matter because theory says it doesn't matter which one you use, which correlator function you use, except for the general topology of it.
Thank you.
Yeah, so the 4 inputs or 3,000 inputs and the 1 output business. 05?
Yeah, that's me. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah.
Okay, so the Wikipedia article helped me out a lot. I finally got it. And I suppose some of your teachers, when you first got into this topic, knew Frank Rosenblatt?
No. We knew of him.
So in the article, 2 things were a breakthrough for me was the back coupling concept and then layers. How the breakthrough was the layers. And so I looked at how many layers the current AI models are incorporating. It's like between 100 and 200 layers. So is this where things are going to get really wild when they have 200,000 layers or something like that?
No, it isn't the layers. So the way to think about it is that there's a great dissertation out there. When you're doing things like counting layers, you're really getting it wrong. So think of computation units. So think of the units that are associated with the retinal neurons. And fusing the two eyes together, okay, fusing what the eyes see. Okay. And those will have some layers, but probably a few layers, probably 3 or 4 layers. There'll be, so one of the ways to think about it is that there are these things called hidden layers, which give these systems real power. So you saw that. And so you typically, in a computational unit, you'll have 3 layers. And you may have that unit may act as a layer for another 3 layers somewhere else. So it may be feeding layer 1, and there'll be another hidden layer that's interpreting something at a higher level. Is this a cat?
Okay. Right. So yeah, when I asked AI how many layers, perceptron layers are being used by certain AI functions, the answers were between 100 and 200.
Yeah, that would be correct for the existing systems. I think everybody understands that.
Last thing, there's a fellow, he's been on, radio and internet and everything for years and years. He's a philosopher. His name is Stefan Molyneux. That's Stefan with an F. And he's really big on metacognition, people trying to look at why do I believe what I believe and things like that. And he would be an excellent person to reach out. He's huge on the internet. It's called Freedom Domain. And I think he's so productive. He does a new video. He does 3 or 4 videos a day.
How do you spell his last name? I may know him.
Molyeux. And the Stefan is with an F. Stef.
Yeah, I know. I think I know this guy. I think I've had interactions with him.
Yeah, so instead of just taking this live call-in thing and try to help people do the same process that Truth Court is doing for people, he could use Truth Court as a way to generate his videos. And I think once he crocked it, he could be a very powerful advocate. Yeah, I think his audience would enjoy watching recordings of him running Truth Court.
Juror 6.
Sorry, Robert, can I cut in? Robert, sorry. I was convinced that I was Juror 5, so I didn't say anything when you were calling out for Juror 3, but I guess I was not Juror 5. Can I just go now then?
Yeah.
Anyway, I wish I had the good idea of Natasha and Teresa to ask AI to explain this to a child. I did not have that good idea. So I was just simply baffled, right, by the article, by everything on the topic. And mainly, I was just wondering how suitable a topic for Truth Court this accusation really is. It seems such a niche topic. And if you're just going to have random punters to be the jurors, like people like me, what can we truly, we're just not qualified to gauge the truth or otherwise of this statement. I think you'd really have to handpick your jurors. Don't you agree?
No.
Oh, so I should have just understood all this?
I taught for 40 years. And I don't know a single teacher who won't tell you that the students teach them more than they teach the students. And a lot of this is just today, for example, y'all taught me several things that I didn't know. So when you're asking me to simplify things, some of the simplifications, like I forgot which juror it was who simplified things. And I said, you're exactly right. Okay. But it gives me ways to explain this. So the people who are, I'll call them the real experts in a science, I'm sure you're aware of this. Scientists vehemently disagree with each other.
Yes, I know, and academics do as well.
Yeah. And so how to explain things to people who should understand is often very hard. And it turns out that students usually teach you how to explain things better. I don't know how to say this any other way. So I like Truth Court for this. I like it for a variety of reasons, but for this kind of thing, I really have already learned something about how I'm going to have to explain this to some of my peers.
But
Because
do you think we've understood whether this is true or not?
you're asking questions which you're
I
getting
mean,
the gist,
is
I
it-
think.
I guess you're right. Truth quote's for the benefit of the plaintiff. It's not for the juror.
No, it's for the jurors too, but it's a question of whether or not. So can I prove the truth of what I'm saying? I could prove the truth of some aspects of what I'm saying, but can I prove that it's the right theory of brain computation? No. I can tell you that it's, from my perspective, it's the most successful explanation we've got, in the sense it's a modeling explanation. But to say that we know, for example, what the correlation function is in the perceptron, I already told you, we don't know. And there's a million of them that we could have chosen. And my belief is you could have chosen any of them, and you'll get the same results. But I don't know. And so that's just the sort of thing. It's like anything, y'all are understanding it the way you will understand it. And
Or fail to.
yeah, or not.
Yeah,
And
my
but
case.
yeah, but it's like me sitting in a chemistry class listening to a chemistry professor. I will understand 10% of what he says, even though I had chemistry. But they talk Greek to me, quite frankly.
But you're suggesting that 10% will teach the teacher.
The 10%, I will say things to the teacher. I'll ask questions of the teacher to get him to explain something that I wanted to understand, and he will learn something about how he's explaining things.
Yeah.
I did learn one thing. I was very interested in the concept of the Turing test.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, probably in my youth, I dated a few men who would not have passed that.
Yeah. Absolutely. They were just different kinds of humans.
That's right.
They're here. Aliens are here.
Alexandra, can you just send me your participation code in a direct message, please?
Okay.
Thank you.
I'll find it. All right.
Okay, I'll go now as juror 6. Yeah, I think the perceptron works pretty well. However, there's a confusion, for me, there's a confusion of terminology, because I think a perceptron network simulates brain activity, but you can't say that it models exactly what the neuron.
Yeah, this is just a terminology issue.
It's a terminology, but it's difficult when you're swapping them back and forth.
Yeah, see, I don't think it simulates it, because to me, simulation means that it's an accurate representation of the process.
All right. Okay. Well, I'm saying if
I
you
don't think it's an accurate. I think it's an accurate. It's an accurate system for prediction, for scientific prediction of what it takes to, like a human computes.
Yeah. But for me, modeling means that you just have slightly reduced sort of number set and things like that, but you've actually got the right structure. Whereas
Yeah.
a simulation just appears to produce similar results, but you don't necessarily know that
Yeah.
it's done it in the same way.
Yeah, I think of this as a modeling system, the way physicists model
Okay, well,
weather and stuff. Yeah.
okay. Anyway, on this basis, though, I think perceptrons don't miss out a whole lot of stuff about the brain, as you pointed out. But one of the reasons, I'll just say briefly, is that perceptrons rely on their inputs being physically and temporally close to one another, which I don't think you can say that is true of the brain.
Actually, they don't, but that's another story.
No, well, they have, then the output makes no sense if they're not close.
No,
because
there are. So the physical
proximity
part, the
of the,
temporal one is within a window. It's at any given point in time. What's the output look like?
Exactly, and that brings me to
So
my
the answer is that it will change.
Yeah.
And so the key is, what are the other perceptrons doing? So you have to think of this as a whole system, but there's no central clock. They're all not ticking off like computers tick off.
No, but I'm just talking about the first layer of inputs, not about the rest of the network.
Yeah,
The first layer, you have to because if they're not close, then you're divergent.
Right, exactly. So there are, for example, in the sensory neurons, there are some real issues there. But I can refresh my memory. I can keep my thoughts in a certain area. I'll keep my focus. So anyway, it's long.
Yeah. Anyway, I just simply want to make the further point that using LLMs, they require pre-digested information because of the comparison always between output and the back propagation. You have to know in some way what output you want.
Most people don't realize, that's only when they're learning. When an LLM is just
in the prompt. You give them the prompt.
Yeah, it doesn't.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. Think about the brain waves, for example. There's none of that in LLMs, and there's lots of stuff going on. But
yeah, that's back to the actual neuroscience, and I think that you can handle a lot of those things in these perceptron systems. It's not timing, but it's a kind of timing. So these waves can be waves of conclusions being.
That's right, but the neuron has that extra thing of the suppression, don't they?
Yeah, and they're plus or minus, which the weights can do that. Yeah, the weights can do the plus or minus stuff.
Yeah, the mimic it. Yeah.
Most people don't know it, but the vast majority of synapses are all plus, and a small number are capable of decreasing.
Yeah. I mean, that's right. That's how the suppressions work, by flooding with negative ions into the thing, so they reduce the potential, the positive potential. Yeah.
So a really interesting question, Andrew, is what is not NOT? So what does that language unit do to your brain?
That's right.
That is a really interesting question when you're understanding not.
Yeah.
And I think we know, but
the absence.
It's not as a language universal. You can not any language. So it must be something fundamental that's going on in exactly what it is we don't understand. But we have some ideas.
In my system of frame and list, it not works perfectly, but we won't get into that.
That's right. I know. You're 8, or are we not right?
Yeah, it's my turn, mod. Oh, what plaintiff? So I'll just give a summary. I don't have much to say, but yeah. So perceptrons are considered a good model, foundational model that the computational units in living neutral systems because they mimic essential structure and function of biological neutrons. And the most important is that they present the process of receiving input signals, weighting their importance, summing them, and making a decision whether to output a signal. The perceptron models, like this word. The perceptrons models this by receiving numerical input values, presenting incoming data signals. So that's why it's a good model for neutral units. And that's why modern deep learning, which takes layers of perceptrons like units, works so well for vision, language, and other brains too. Thank you.
Yeah. And one of the predictions I make in this paper is I say, if you can identify a perceptron in a brain, in a living brain, okay, if we can do that, you will be able to describe in natural language what that perceptron is doing. That's a prediction. The prediction is that your natural language is evolved to be able to do that. If we can identify, we don't actually know exactly how to identify the perceptron in the brain, but if we ever do, now we've got instances where we think we can. But if we ever really do, and in those cases, we can explain what they're doing in English or in French or whatever. But it should always be the case. The argument is that should always be the case if the theory is right. So there's nothing your brain can compute that you can't explain in language. But what it's recognizing, what it's seeing, how it's having its effect on the overall computation that's going on in the brain. That's just a prediction. I thank y'all for being tolerant. I just had to do this one.